everything looks really good. I'm really happy so far. So let me get the bolt back in to the crank snout so I can turn over the engine and I can start marking these. And then we will go from there and we'll start pulling out the pistons out from the bottom. Before I get too carried away though, I want to take the timing gear off. I'll have to go find the puller. I don't have it handy to pull this gear off, the crank gear. But I do want to pull this, this cam gear and pull the chain off. Usually the gear just comes off. Oh, it's with the cam, which is okay. And the gear comes off. Again, it looks like a factory gear. You can see the GM markings and the part numbers on it. So again, I think this is a factory gear. Now the crank gear typically, it's not going to come off. So I'm going to have to, sometimes you can, once you take it out, you can hit a punch, brass punch, and punch it this way off. But I'll have to go see where my gear puller is and see if I'm going to pull that off. If I can't find it, I'm going to go ahead and use the punch method once I get the crank shaft out. Or if you're going to get the crank machined, just take it to the machine shop. They usually won't charge it to pop that off if you can't find anything to get it off with. So to get my cam out, I'm actually going to put the timing gear back in, and it's going to serve as basically a handle, and then I can just pull it straight out. It will catch on the bearings that are inside the block. You have to be really careful. If you're going to get new bearings, it's not such a big deal. But then FYI, if you are going to have new bearings put in and you get it back from the machine shop, because you need a special tool for those. That's something else I don't have. And that also, putting those cam bearings in and out can be really tricky if you're not have any experience with it. I recommend you have a machine shop, a professional do that has the proper tool. So anyways, I put the gear in and I'm just gonna pull on it, and it takes a little finesse. You can also, if it's kind of up on the bearings, you can also pull it down on the bearings and it'll put a groove in them. That's another reason you got to be really careful. It just takes a little bit of playing. You want to maybe turn it a little bit as you're trying to get it out. Now you got a little bit more of a grip here. Sometimes you could, I actually could have waited. I got the pistons out and the connecting rods and the crank, and I could have put my hand in there and reached around, but I'm getting a little too ahead of myself. Just be careful with it, walk it out. There's the distributor here, so we know we're at the end because the distributor's in the back in a small block Chevy. Now all these journals, I was saying earlier about how the lifter bottoms looked, these all should be pretty shiny and they're darkened, so there's definitely a lot of wear in this cam, and that would explain the lifter, found some of the lifters. Some are good and others are really dark. Should be dark when you first put it in, a new cam, because it has to wear, but these are worn, so definitely have to get a new cam. Then, as I was saying, I needed a spacer to put here. I just grabbed an old socket, put it in here, and then tighten it up. And now I can use my breaker bar and I can move over the engine. The engine actually turned good before, but it actually turns really good. And another thing you can do before we start taking this out, you can move side to side. If you had a rod clicking, or a loose rod, you would feel it in here, and if you move this back and forth, you would be able to hear it. So I don't think we have any rod problems. Again, I don't know why this engine was set aside. Yeah, I don't hear any clicking or movement, so hopefully the engine's good. We'll get back into it. We're going to mark the rods, and we'll start taking the pistons connecting rods out, and then we'll take the crank out. So now we're ready to take our bottom end apart, and we're going to start with the connecting rods, get the pistons out, and then we're going to work to our main bearing caps. Then we can take the crankshaft out, and that's just, besides a few other things, that's all we're going to have to do, and then we can get this block ready to go to the machine shop. But I'm going to do some measurements here first before I send it out, because I think we won't need to bore it, and I don't want to have to because I don't want to spend the money. It's kind of a budget build. So let's go ahead and mark the rods. You see, I got a little ahead of myself, but I got too excited. I wanted to see what the bearings look like, and they actually look really good. So I'm going to mark, I did mark the number 1 on this side, and when I do that, I'm going to put a mark in the corresponding pan rail. So this one I'm going to mark number 2 with my number stamper, as I talked about previously, and then I'm just going to put a 2 here on the pan rail just as a reference point, so I know this is orientated on this side. This goes here, and then it's easier for the rebuild. And then also I want to make sure that I keep the connecting rods and the cap and the rod itself together, so when I put it back together, it all goes back the same way. So I'm first going to mark it on the rail. This is number 2, so I'm going to use a number 2. Got a nice 2 here. Then I'm going to line this up. You want to put it right on these little flat spots here on the connecting rod. You don't want to hit the connecting rod anywhere else. This top part, you can see in the cap I already took off, that is a balancing pad, and you don't want to do anything to this pad. This is where, if you do get the lower end, balance, they actually take the material off this to balance the rod and the piston assembly. So let me go ahead then, and I'm going to put a number 2. Try to get this flat as you can so it leaves a good impression of the entire number. I got a 2 there. Same thing here. And I got a couple of nice 2s. So I'm going to go ahead and take the nuts off. And I'm going to take the rod cap off. Now the best way to get this cap off is just take a ball peen hammer and just hit real lightly. Don't hit it too hard, you don't want to leave a dent in it. You could throw the balance off as well. And just tap it lightly and kind of walk the cap off. These have a little flat spots here in the end of the cap in the end, so I could actually try to hit on those, or I could also take a screwdriver and try to lift up on there. But let's see if I can tap this. Light tap, light pressure. Try to wiggle it at the same time, and I can also hit on these flat spots. And it's coming a little bit. Let me get a screwdriver on the other one. So I'm just putting pressure on the other side, the same flat spot. Now it's coming a little bit loose. There we go. Oh, it's still stuck a little bit. There we go. Now surprisingly, these bearings look really good. These are probably the nicest bearings I've ever had taking a used engine apart, which I think has a lot of wear. So either somebody wasn't beating on this Corvette, or they changed the oil a lot. And even the journal looks like this. It's nice and shiny. This is the nicest I've ever seen this engine, what I think has a lot of wear. Never seen them these nice. And I looked at the other one already, but I looked at the back of the bearing, and this bearing it's got a GM on it. So this is actually most likely the factory bearing. And usually they put an easy date on it. And I looked at the other one, I couldn't see the date. There's like a 71 here, and this part number, it could be 1971, I don't know. Normally they just put like a month and a year, but I don't see them on these bearings. So if they all look this good, this is really good news. You know, when you buy a used engine, you gotta assume the worst, which is what I assume with this one. So now I'm ready to go ahead, and I want to push the connecting rod out, which would be towards the head. It's actually towards the top, even though it's upside down. We're going to push it out towards the bottom. So we have to go ahead first, and we have to protect our connecting rod bolts, because we don't want the thread or anything to put heavy scratches or gouges or grooves into our crankshafts. So what I did is I just took some heater hose I had lying around, and I'm going to push it over to protect it. It's already moving on me a little bit. Put this other one here, the other side, and we'll go ahead and we can push this out. So I'm going to push it out from the bottom, and there's hardly any ridge. I didn't talk about ridge. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it is going to catch. There's some carbon on there. And actually this one's coming right out. The other one was a little more stubborn. So now it's catching a little bit, and you got to make sure if you're going to apply some pressure down in this force, this direction, that you hold the piston here, because otherwise it's going to go flying out, and you could damage the piston, you could crack it, score it. You can actually get small cracks in it you won't see, but if you're going to reuse the piston, then it actually might crack once you get it in the block, and you definitely, after you reassemble it, you definitely don't want that. So just to push this out, I'm going to take a block of wood, and I'm just going to push it down on top of the piston. The block of wood's soft; it's not gonna do any damage if you're real careful and hurting, and not to hurt anything. So just go like this and tap it, and it comes right out. Now actually this piston looks really good. The other one had a little more scoring in it, but you'll see here it's just a very, very light scratch. Again, I'm shocked for the amount of wear I think that this thing has. And this one had hardly any scoring in it. The piston looks good. The ringland grooves are not damaged or anything. So this bearing looks really good. Looks good as the other one. It's a shiny right here, but that's actually in the two sides. That's where it's going to wear. It's going to wear mostly right in here, and then the corresponding area inside the cap. So this looks really good. I'm going to go ahead and then I'm going to mark the rest of the caps, put my corresponding mark here on the block, and then I'm going to go ahead and take them all out, and we'll see what we have. So I completely removed all the connecting rods and pistons out of the engine, and the cylinders actually look really good. There's some very light scratching where you'd expect it to be, which where the skirts ride, and I think it's be just fine. Normally the rule of thumb is if you can run your nail across it, and if you can catch something, it probably should be bored. But of course we're going to have to mic the cylinders and see if they're in spec. But if they're in spec, I think I'm not going to do anything with them. I'm just going to re-hone them and put the original pistons back in. With this cylinder is the worst. You can see this scratch right here, and I can run my nail over it, and it does catch it. You can feel it with your nail actually. It's deep, but this is only the worst one. And for what we're going to do with this engine, we're just going to do a budget rebuild, and we're going to put it in a car which an unknown car yet. We got to find something fun to put it in, but it's going to be basically a summer cruiser. So I'm really not concerned about the wear that's in the cylinders, as long as they're in spec. So this is actually the piston. That's the corresponding piston that I took out of there, and it does have a little bit of scoring, but all the pistons still have all this machine ridge on it, which is really good. And you can see a little bit more scoring there, and that's probably where the corresponding groove is. But they look really good. This is the worst one, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the engine back over, and I'm going to start taking the main caps off so I can get the crankshaft out. Now what I was talking about was this groove called a ridge. And when the piston rings move up and down in the cylinder, they only go so far. And the top ring stops right here where you can see the carbon and sludge buildup. Normally, again, you feel it with your nail, if it catches. This one doesn't catch at all, it goes right across, which is really surprising because I thought this engine had a lot of wear. If it had a lot of wear, you get a nice groove in here and you need a ridge cutter, and you got to go ahead and cut this entire ridge out before you can sometimes even get the piston out, because the rings will catch on there. Sometimes you can get the pistons out with a little bit of ridge, but before you put it back in the piston and the connecting rod assembly, you have to cut that out. So this one's actually really good. Again, there's no ridge. I can't even catch it with my nail. You can also see in the cylinder there's still a crosshatch in here, so it's like an etching in the cylinder that's in a cross shape, and all the cylinders have that, and which is pretty remarkable, because as you tear something apart this old and as much wear as I think it has in it, you wouldn't still have much of a crosshatch like that. So again, really tells a story. Its engine's in remarkable good shape for as crusty as it looks and what the miles I thought it had on it. It may not be a lot of miles at all, maybe it's just age, but I still think it has a lot of miles on it, but the cylinders and the bearings look remarkably well. So I am going to then turn the engine back over and give you a back shot then, and try to give you what we're working with. So we have the rest of the block here, and then let's turn it back over. So all these journals look really good. And again, there's a slight scratch in this one. So there's a slight scratch in this one. And this is the corresponding, you see a slight groove right there, a slight line. There's one over in here too. This is a corresponding bearing for that one. So the outer layer of the bearing is a coating called Babbitt, so it's nice and soft. So this is what you want to see, the Babbitt impregnated with dirt or whatever else that's laying around in the oil or floating around, and you don't want to see it in this nice journal. It saves the journals. It's one of the purposes of having Babbitt as an outer layer. So this bearing is no good. It's got a nice groove in it, but there's no groove. You don't feel it in here. Now, of course, we're going to mic these. We're going to mic these, and then we're going to see if these are in spec. The other wear I had, not so much. You can still see the journal on number 3 and 4 is really nice. But this is the bearing here, and this bearing's got a nice groove in it. So this is the one that was number 3. Journal's really nice, but the bearing's got a deep groove in it. Now, one thing I did notice when I was tearing it apart is that in the oil drain hole, or the oil feed hole actually, for the bearing, had this little piece of silicone in it. And it matches where that oil feed hole is and where that bearing is. So I've seen engines before where people overuse the silicone, and what it does is it oozes out into your oil, and then it gets caught up in the oil filtration system, or through, so I should say, the oil circulation system, and it doesn't catch in the filter. And I've actually seen so much silicone ooze in there where I've taken the engine apart and it was sticking out because it caught in that oil feed hole, and it caught in there and tried to work its way out, and it locked up the engine. So this is why I don't like to use silicone I use silica when I rebuild engines, but I use it sparingly. I use it only where I have to, because I've seen that before. I've seen it destroy engines. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to take apart take the main caps off here, and then we're going to go ahead and pull the crankshaft out. So one thing I didn't show you when I was taking it apart is I didn't take out the oil pump. I had to do it to get at the bearings. So simple 1 bolt right here, and this is your oil pump drive that goes to the distributor, the bottom of the distributor shaft. So this is just 1 bolt here, and this thing just pulls right out. It bolts right into this special cap, which also has your thrust bearing, which I'll show when I take this lower end apart. So now, one thing I did notice too with this engine, normally the caps are stamped. They're stamped 1, 2, 3, 4, and well, this is obviously 5 because it only goes in one position in the engine. And this, I wiped off the oil with some brake clean, and these caps, for whatever reason, they don't have a number on them. They have a number sequence for manufacturing. These are a little forward arrows, so it does tell you it goes forward, but I don't see any kind of 1, 2, 3 identifiers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my number stamper and I'm going to put just a stamp 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to put it right on the side here, and then I'm going to put a mark on the corresponding boss right here, just to make sure, again, they go forward, but I just want to make sure that I put them in the right spot. It's a little easier when I'm going to rebuild it. So I'm going to do that right now, and I'm going to start taking off the main bearing caps. Okay, so now I'm going to start taking the main caps off. I'm going to start with number 3. You don't have to do them in any order, no specific reason. So these are going to be a lot tighter than the rod nuts were. I think from memory they're about 30 pound-feet of torque, the rod bolts. These are something like 80 to 90 off the, just memorying off the top of my head. So these are going to take a little more work to get out. It wasn't too bad. And again, I marked. It's a little hard to see some of the marks because they're on a round surface, so I ended up marking them. I don't like marking on the top. This cap, I want to especially not do it in a rod cap, but this main cap, it's pretty stout. I'm just worried if I tap on here, it's going to just distort it a little bit. But these caps are pretty stout. They should be okay. So I did mark them here as well. It's a little hard, like I said, a little hard to see there. I marked them on a corresponding pad, and now I'm going to take off the cap. And this is where you'll get a lot of oil sludge built up in the hole, and it's a unique smell. It smells pretty bad. You'll know it when you get it apart. And like that there, all that's years and years of oil sludge built up into those holes. So I found now I'm starting to get awful smell I told you about. So the best way to get these caps off is they need to be They have to be tight into the block. There's material here where it goes in the block where they lock in, so the caps don't walk back and forth. The best way to get these out, though, is just bleed the bolts in and move the cap. And get it off. And let's see. Wow. I'm just shocked how good that bearing looks. That looks really good. And so does the journal. So let's see if I can find a date on it. Well, it's got the GM stamping. It says 74. I mean, the engine could be a 74. I think it's 73, but again, I don't see. I mean, it's remarkable that that bearing looks that good. And you'll see the wear, then it's just mainly from here to here, which is supposed to be. This is where the wear is going to be. So, wow, it looks remarkably well. I can't believe it. Now, when you get this block prepped, once we get the crankshaft out, we have to do a little more prep work, and then we can get it ready for the machine shop. Again, I'm going to mic the cylinders first, but I'm actually going to take it and get it degreased. So they're going to clean up all this grease, and the block will look like new when it comes back out. And I'm going to have the cam bearings taken out and put back in. I do not have a tool for them. You need the right tool or you will not get them right. So let me finish up with this, and then we'll continue. When you take us to the machine shop, you got to have the caps back on, especially if you're going to do any boring, because they use this to center the block into the head fixture machine. So once you get all these out, you want to put the caps back in. You can just snug up the bolts, and then you can get it, prep it, and then you'll be able to take it to the machine shop. So I'm going to get the rest of these out, and hopefully they're going to look all as good at this, because right now we can, if the crank's in spec, we can reuse it. We don't have to have it ground. So here's our engine all torn down. The crankshaft's out. The crankshaft journals look really good where the main bearings ride. These particular bearings don't look too good in the block, but they look good in the cap. You can see that it's not silver anymore. It's all worn down to its copper, which is another component of our material that the bearing is made out of. This is our thrust washer here, so when the crankshaft moves back and forth, it does that for two different reasons. In a manual trans, when you're pushing the clutch in and out, the crankshaft will move back and forth. On an automatic trans car, when the converter fills up, that moves, and that move the crankshaft back and forth. So you have a thrust surface here to keep the crankshaft movement at a minimum. And this one looks, the thrust surface looks okay. This is worn down, this bearing half. So, well, again, we're going to change all the bearings, but the crankshaft looks good. We'll mic it out. They're probably standard bearings. They're probably not, because they're factory. So we can go ahead and just buy standard size bearings, and as long as the crank again mics out okay. So got a few other things to do. One of the things we got to do, real minor and we'll be finished, is to take this to the machine shop in order to get it degreased. You have to remove everything. Now, the machine shop will do that, but they would charge you more for it. So like these freeze plugs, any kind of plugs or bolts into there, these are for the oil galleys. And these are little caps. Those little caps have to come out, and you want to get those out anyways, because you want to be able, once the engine's completely torn down, you want to make sure you can get a rifle brush or something through there, run it all through, and make sure everything's all cleaned out. This little plug here, that's another one. I think I already loosened it up before. So anything that's left over, I got to take the fuel pump plate off. But anything that's left, you got to take it out so it can go to the machine shop. So there's these oil, a little hard to see, but there's some plugs in there. They use a threaded plug in the back and the front. It goes right where those little caps were that I showed you before. Those all have to come out. So I also like to take the dowel pins out so the block will stand flat on the back side. The only thing I don't take out is the dowel pins, because they're sometimes they're very difficult to get out, and as long as it's not, if it's going to be decked, the machine shop will do it. Otherwise you don't need to take those out. That's the only thing you really don't take out. So I'm going to show you the proper way to remove the freeze plug, and you always want to take the freeze plugs out at this stage. They will start leaking over time. Something this old, they definitely will leak between this freeze plug surface here in the block. I've seen old engines that have been in cars for a long time, and they start leaking and they make a real big mess. So, and they're very difficult to change when the engine's in the block. So just common practice, you're going to rebuild it, change the freeze plugs. So I found the best way to remove these freeze plugs over time is you just want to try to hit on one side and push it in, and what it does is it walks it so it comes up kind of straight, and then you can pull it out with a pair of channel locks. Or if you can push, you don't want to push it in, it's a little hard to get out, but if you do push it in, you can grab on this one edge and pull it out. Now you got to be really careful with the procedure I just described, because right here and here is your cylinder walls, and I actually have seen someone try to get this freeze plug out, punch a chisel or something in there and punch a hole and crack the cylinder and go through it and damage the block, and it basically ruined the block. You can sleeve it, but it, you know, in my opinion, once you do something like that, the block is junk. So what I'm going to do is hit on this edge and hopefully get this plug out. It's moving a little bit. Oh, well, that's okay. But this is what I was saying. Just push it. Be careful with it. Take a pair of channel locks, and you can just pull it out like that. And you see that's all old coolant that's been sitting in the block for a long time. I think I already talked about that, but it's a lot old. This is a lot of old coolant in here. That's why it looked all that orange when I turned the engine over that one time. But again, once the block gets degreased, I don't think there's no rust issues with it. So that's the way to properly pull out a freeze plug. You've got, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. You got 7 more to get out, and then there's a cap in the back of the block where the cam stops. There's a big plug, you got to get that out too. So that's all the time we got for today. We completed our goal of tearing down our Chevy 350 engine, doing some inspection on the parts, seeing what's good and what's bad. In future shows, I'm going to show you how to inspect further these parts and to measure them. So hopefully everything's good in our engine and we can reuse a lot of these hard parts. So good luck with your projects, and remember, it's not a rewarding day unless you get dirty.